almost everybody has some element of core unmet need. It's very hard to be parented in the Western world and have all of your core emotional needs met, even if you've got very well-meaning parents. So we end up with these patterns of thought, feeling, and sensation with little memory parts in there as well, that then make it hard for us to be free to fulfill our full potential. And obviously for some people, there's very severe abuse and neglect, but even in clients who are reasonably high functioning day-to-day life, they just feel like something's missing, or they can't accept love or compliments, or they can't progress in their career because they don't feel good enough. It'll often come back to these core unmet needs, and remembering that these form when you're a child and you're very dependent and you see everything through the lens of your carer and your desire to be seen and noticed. So schema therapy is about that.
Hello, everybody. We are here today for one more interview where we will be talking with a very interesting speaker this time. I'm Vaski Sarandopoulou from Anti-Loneliness, your trusted psychologist. Today, I have a very special speaker, Nadene van der Linden. She's a clinical psychologist, accredited EMDR therapist, and certified schema therapist with a special interest in trauma and body-based techniques. So many questions. This is so interesting. I'm looking forward to start talking to you, Nadene. Please let us know a few things about you. What do you do, where you live? That's also an interesting information. But also how a typical day of yours look like.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Asia, for having me on the program. I'm living in Australia, in Perth, which is just so far from where you are. It's very hot where I am, and I'm sure over there that's not the case.
Yeah.
So today in particular is quite warm. And
we're so jealous.
I'm still waiting for that aircon to actually cool me down. And so, yeah, I've been working as a trauma therapist mainly for a very long time. It just was always there in the work, no matter where I worked. So I worked in the Kimberley of Western Australia, which has a very large Indigenous population. And then I did my master's in clinical psychology, and I worked in various placements in an obstetric hospital. And this theme of trauma was sitting there underneath everything. And so when I went into my own private practice, I decided that I would create a niche theme around the practice of trauma, because I could just see it, even with a lot of anxiety and depressive disorders. If you looked, there would be some kind of trauma there. And then over the years, I've become more and more specialized in those things. And then I've started to become quite involved in training and mentoring therapists, particularly because I like to work very actively and use a lot of the processing techniques and just emotional experiencing techniques. And not a lot of therapists have confidence in those. So they come to me for that thing. And then also I help them to actually enjoy their careers more and reduce isolation. So that's something that, you know, you and I have a bit in common, that we believe in connection. And originally, I started this work just by starting a Facebook group for other therapists in private practice, because people are so isolated, often not even working with other colleagues in the building. And although we connect with our clients, there's just a need for connection with colleagues as well. And so now this group is very large. It's soon going to go over 4,000 members, but it brings lots of psychologists across Australia together. And the idea is to support each other. So you can ask any questions around being in private practice, or if you need support or encouragement, or to be pointed in a particular direction. And it's really, I think, quite a valuable resource now for Australian psychologists. So I'm quite proud of doing that. And it just sort of then led to growing this role of being more of a senior psychologist and really nurturing clinicians throughout their career. And it's not just people at the beginning of their careers. A lot of the time it's people in the middle of their careers. They're feeling quite burnt out or disillusioned, or just not sure why it doesn't feel the way that they thought it would feel when they had become skilled. So yeah.
Yes, all right. Yes.
Yeah. And so I
Yeah.
guess a typical day for me, I'm a mother of 2 children as well. So I've always got some sort of morning routine around the children. And then I come into my clinic here, which I've just actually opened in October. It's my first time having my own lease, so that's lovely. And I see a combination of therapy clients and supervisees for the clinical work. So I think, but I do a lot of schema therapy and EMDR. And so people want to come to me because I'm one of a few clinicians who offer both of those at, with a reasonable level of expertise. And so, there's a lot of Zoom consults because people are meeting with me from all over Australia. And that's just been a lovely, amazing whirlwind for me over the last 2 years, from basically being someone who saw people face to face 100% of the time, Monday to Friday, to just, sometimes I'm even meeting with people in other countries, which is really exciting. And although there's not much to like about COVID-19, that people are now very comfortable with video has just been wonderful.
Indeed.
And I now also see a lot of psychologists for their own therapy in different states because they prefer to have someone who's not in their local community. And so in that way, that's been a really amazing bonus of the pandemic.
Yeah, busy and exciting as well, huh?
Yeah. Sorry. About my days, I'm often at yoga. So I usually have yoga classes in the evening, and that's been really important for my well-being over this pandemic period. And I also have a couple of dogs, so I spend time with them and keep them happy and healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. That also helps with our mental health.
Sure.
I'm a member of this Facebook community, and I find it so valuable to be there. I see how passionate you are about this, how you are there to support other therapists with their questions, how you're promoting schema therapy and the resources you have and the techniques of schema therapy. So I really admire you for the work that you and the hours and the passions that you're putting in this. We can really see that you love
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the group that you're in, is the Schema Therapy Made Simple group. So that's my second group. And I guess I've now become quite good at how to engage therapists on Facebook. And I am very passionate about being therapist. And I think that's why I can have this mentoring and coaching business, because people can see that, Nadine's been doing this for 20 years and she's still really passionate, and I want to feel like that too. But thank you for the feedback about the group. It's lovely to hear that, and I appreciate it, because sometimes I do feel like I try and bring ideas from everywhere to get people thinking about schema therapy, and I'm like, do they think I'm a little bit, off center with that? But I like to think of it as being creative.
Of course. It's very creative actually, because I like also that you're using, you're taking some random images and you are seeing you're somebody would see a commercial, but you see schema therapy in there. So I love that. Like you make us think all the time about schema therapy.
I think my favorite one was when I took a video of my daughter feeding a llama while we were on a holiday, and it was very bossy, and it made this funny noise. And I could see modes in that from schema therapy, which is the schema word for parts of self. So that was my favorite. I'm not sure what everybody else thought of it, but you're right. I can find ways to bring light to schema therapy and educate people in probably a bit more of a light and fun way. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Of course, because I have the same, let's say, tendency. I see everywhere modes. I see everywhere, like the inner critic, the modes, and it's like an obsession to some degree. I understand what you're saying, but other than that, you're doing a very amazing job, a very valuable job, because I know when you say that therapists sometimes struggle, sometimes they don't feel confident about their skills. Just going to a training doesn't mean that automatically you feel confident about using the techniques. And it can feel really lonely if you don't trust your own skills, if you don't trust your own knowledge. You're constantly doubting about yourself, second guessing yourself. But having somebody that's, either a supervisor or a mentor that can actually guide you or confirm that you're doing it right, go on, it's okay. It's amazing. It's really very helpful.
Yeah. And I think also to know that most people aren't going to break if you do some of these more evocative techniques. So because, I just do so much of them that it actually is. I don't know if you know Scott Kellogg. You probably do from the
Yeah.
ISST, but when this all came to light for me is because I was going to trainings, and not even were people not doing it after they left the training. Obviously, they were not doing them at the training. And Scott made this comment about that, and I thought, oh, this must be happening all over the world, that people just prefer to watch and they won't do. And then I started to think, how can I help people with that? Because that's something that I don't have an issue with. So I go to the training, I do the training, I'll even role play with the trainer, and then I'll straight away embed it the next day at work. And so, and then I started to think, well, how am I doing that? And what allows me to be free to do that when other people are basically paralyzed with terror about getting it wrong, I guess. So, and so I've emailed Scott about that since, actually, because I said to him, you have to know that you inspired me to do this, because he does talk about people being traumatized by their training. And I think a lot of it comes from that, in that initial, when we're being guided to provide a good and ethical service to our clients, there's quite a lot of criticism that comes, and people feel afraid to make a misstep. So you almost have to unlearn that if you're going to do things like EMDR and imagery rescripting and chair work and, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly. Probably a very strong inner critic inside our head that makes us feel that we need to be perfect before we practice it. And that's why we keep watching it. But then we're not becoming better just by watching it. We're becoming better just by practicing and being imperfect.
Yes, that's right. And, I think assuming that everybody else's critic is going to attack you and be judging you. So, yeah. So that's kind of how I've come into all of that. And it's one thing I do love about schema therapy is that people talk about things in a way that's just so inspiring, I find, when I do training with the people who've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. We're talking about schema therapy as if everybody knows that it's schema therapy. But I love schema therapy. I mean, it changed my world when I got trained in schema therapy. So you, as a schema therapist, can you tell us a few things about this approach? What is it that you love so much about it? And when you're using it with your clients, either they are individuals or they are practitioners, how is this approach supporting them and their needs?
Well, the thing about schema therapy that's core to it is about needs. It's about the core needs of everybody. And so that's how, I can apply it across all aspects of my work. But I think the beauty of that is that it can be very flexible and it can be tailored to people, but it really gets to the heart of why we are doing the things that we're doing, why we can't do some of the things that we would like to do, why some of our relationships are so difficult, because it all comes down to this idea that when core needs are not met, we end up with these schemas. So we end up with these patterns of thought, feeling, and sensation, with little memory parts in there as well, that then make it hard for us to be free to fulfill our full potential. And almost everybody has some element of core unmet need. It's very hard to be parented in the Western world and have all of your core emotional needs met, even if you've got very well-meaning parents. And obviously for some people, there's very severe abuse and neglect. But even in clients who are reasonably high functioning day-to-day life, they just feel like something's missing, or they can't accept love or compliments, or they can't progress in their career because they don't feel good enough. It'll often come back to these core unmet needs, and remembering that these form when you're a child and you're very dependent and you see everything through the lens of your carer, and your desire to be seen and noticed. So schema therapy is about that, but then I think the thing for me that I love about it, initially I loved it because it had all these amazing techniques. So I'm a lover of technique. I love to do things. My old website was about come to Nadene because she's active in the therapy room, and you won't just talk and blah, blah. And so in schema therapy, we use chairs in the room, and we have people either sitting on chairs or talking to chairs to explore these things like their inner critic, or ways that they've learned to cope, which we then call a mode or a part of self. And we also use imagery work where we get people to tap into a feeling or a thought and then float that back, and we find images from the past that connect to that. And so I loved that, like it was really, really great. But then the thing that I've realized over time is that without the reparenting relationship being there in parenting, they don't actually work that well, and they are kind of just throwing little scraps at people. I mean, I probably shouldn't be that harsh about it, but really, I think with schema therapy, what is so amazing about it is the limited reparenting relationship between the therapist and the client, in which the therapist tries to meet the needs of the client and be in that parent role and give what the parent didn't give. Or sometimes, these things have come through sporting and coaching experiences or teachers that were very punitive. And let's remember, children spend a lot of time with these people. So one of my clients has a terrible inner critic, and it's got to do with hours and hours of dance coaching that was just very brutal and punitive, not so much the parenting. So, but then the parents weren't attuned enough to notice that was happening, I guess. And so schema therapy allows you to really deeply care and be a real therapist with someone, and also have these very active techniques that can help move people and create insights and shifts in a way that doesn't always happen in some of the other therapy models. And I think it's very nurturing and validating for a lot of our clients. So like many clinical psychologists, my solid training was cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's a lot that's great about that. But one of the problems is that it tends to just, with certain types of people where these schemas are quite entrenched or they just had a difficult past, it tends to make you feel like I'm just thinking wrong about things, or I'm behaving the wrong way, or if I just change, and it doesn't get underneath why you have these thoughts in the first place. And I think sometimes what we've done and I am a former cognitive behavioral therapist myself, is we've sort of helped people to band-aid over some things and provide some skills, but then the problem comes back again because they're still quite wounded underneath all of that. And then sometimes their critic can get worse because they're thinking, why can't I think the way that the therapist told me, or why can't I stop having these thoughts about how I'm not good enough or I'm not lovable, or those sorts of things. So yeah, it's really been quite an interesting shift for me, because I started off in love with the techniques, and now I'm in love with the limited reparenting, and now I'm trying to put all of those together. One of the things about the accreditation process is you do have to watch a lot of tapes of yourself. So I've completed the first part of that, and then I'm in the middle of the advanced component now, and I've only got one tape left to go now, but I've watched a lot of tapes of myself, and it allows me to see what is actually happening between myself and the client in a different way, and to fine tune that and get better at the relationship aspect of it, and kind of create a bit more space for that, rather than just thinking, what do I do now? Do I pull out a chair, or do I get them to float back, or should we do a role play, or which, all of those things. And sometimes I think I probably shouldn't be too critical of myself, that I've done quite good work with people over the years, and this is just the next stage for me to deepen that. So if you're listening to this and you're a therapist, it isn't a bad way to work, but it's just really getting in tune with that much of the healing happens right brain to right brain in the relationship. And that's sometimes why our intervention-based work fails, because we're focusing too much on what should I do now, rather than how can I be for that client? What do they need?
So right. You're so right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can be a fantastic therapist with the greatest and most efficient techniques, but then if you're not connecting, as you said, right brain to right brain, if you're not focusing on the moment, what's happening between you and your client, it's not going to work. It will be just a temporary fix, or it will be great for some moment, but then there will be something missing, which is this therapeutic relationship element that you mentioned. I absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
And I think the tricky part is it's slower, right? And in the modern world, we want fast. We have regulators who are saying, well, I can't, that's 12 sessions for that person. Or at the moment in Australia, we're very lucky we've got 20, which is like a miracle, because we only had 10 for a while per year that the government would help support. But then it creates this pressure of, how do I get someone to be well in 10 sessions? And there isn't a lot of space for right brain to right brain healing. And that's why these very technique-oriented approaches have sort of been so dominant, I think. But when people have had their problems for a very, very long time, they just need that limited reparenting relationship, and they need the space and the time. And that is one of the things that you can do as a schema therapist. And now when I book someone in, I will actually say to them, I only work with people who are ready to commit to a minimum of 20 sessions, and probably it's going to be more of that, but it's got to be for something that you're quite stuck with. And because I want to provide the space for people who are ready for that. As much as I do, I did do a lot of work where people came in with little temporary crises, and it can feel really good, just give them a few different ways to think about things, and they go off and they feel great. But it's just not where I'm at with my journey and how I want to help people.
I work on the same way, and that's also the reason why I don't choose to work with insurance companies, because they instruct you to work on 10, 6, 15 sessions. But for me, this is not enough in order to build a relationship, to heal. And it feels like, like an external critic telling you what's happening. 4 sessions.
I know.
What are you doing? Push.
Exactly. And that actually happens. I was talking to someone the other day that I supervise who does all workers' compensation, which is an insurance-based thing. And you will then get external psychologists looking at the file and saying, why isn't that happening? And you should have got them better. And, so it's a real critic. But I think, and that comes with freedom of experience, I think, and working in your own private practice. So I just want to acknowledge not everybody's able to work outside of those systems. But I think you and I obviously have both taken steps to move away from that, and you can do it. I mean, I've certainly done it. I've even moved quite well away from that Medicare system, although I would say most of my clients need that, but it's not heavily regulated. It's just that the rebates run out and then they have to wait for the next year. So when we had 10, it's very hard to stretch that across a year for people who don't have a lot of extra money. But
absolutely. Yeah. Talking about schema therapy and trauma, can you tell me more how schema therapy can help us heal from past trauma?
Yeah, so I think schema therapy has a really good place in helping with trauma, particularly trauma that's happened through early life experience and those patterns that we've developed from there. I would have to say, when it's like a recent incident trauma that's created a PTSD, then usually my preference for that would be EMDR, because that can get very quick relief from any flashbacks or nightmares and things that have happened. But then at the same time, typically I find people who develop PTSD often have these schemas lying underneath it. So instead of being able to resolve in that 1 month time frame that we would generally see after a severe incident, it gets stuck in part because of the schemas. The schemas can't let that go, or they have a very strong punitive critic mode, and it sort of actually almost reinforces what the schemas are telling them about themselves. So schema therapy can really help with that aspect of it. So helping the person shift more broadly in their life, not just with the trauma. And with schema therapy, we're lucky to have the imagery rescripting technique within the range of techniques, and that can be a really great way of processing trauma too. Not just for what I talked about before, where we float back into the past and look at the unmet need and try and meet the needs of the vulnerable child part of the client. But we can actually use imagery rescripting for those not every day, but those big incident traumas as well. And some people, I know some of the schema therapists even, they do know how to do EMDR, but they say they can do this really well with imagery rescripting as well. So it's a beautiful tool that I guess it allows us to grab just a little part of that overwhelming event in a safe way with the presence of a therapist there, and to be supported through that. And for most clients, with whatever therapy technique you're using to process trauma, that's going to be part of it, is being able to sort of pendulate into that and then out of it again, but to not feel alone while you're doing that. So this is not to say it's in any way easy to either do EMDR or imagery rescripting or any of those things, and it's why so many people avoid having their trauma treated. But it's definitely worth doing to free yourself from a life that's impacted by trauma, because it's there often and you don't even know it, kind of impacting your sense of freedom, what you can and can't do in life, even your sense of who you are. So
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that's where schema therapy, the beauty of it is saying, look, all these things that are really hard for you, they're probably not the authentic you. You know, they're just ways that you learned how to be and that you needed them up until now. So it's very non-shaming. It's very compassionate, and that way we can help people to actually really almost, you know, and I've experienced it for myself in my own schema therapy. It's like I get to be who I was meant to be without all the layering of the other stuff that happened.
Exactly.
And to claim that for the first time, or just to really be able to value that. And so as much as it's an extremely difficult journey, I would encourage anyone who's listening today to try it and stick with it, because, you know, there have been points with me in therapy where I'm like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore, or I go, that's enough for now, you know, because I think, you know, especially if you don't have, when you're a trauma therapist and you've read many, many case histories and you've worked with lots of people who have really overtly extreme trauma, your own traumas can seem quite minimal, and so you kind of think that's enough care for me, but I should be right now, and you move on. Yeah,
Indeed,
but
indeed.
it's, you know, it's there for all of us to have that opportunity to be more authentically who we are and to be freer. So
It's a beautiful experience, even though it's hard work, as you said, because you get to reconnect with yourself, with your authentic self. And sometimes we believe that, well, I'm not meant to be somebody else, or that's the most that I can get. I cannot get further. We give up because we think that we don't deserve more, or we're broken, we're damaged, we're wounded. But then through this experience, you get to see that it's possible to be your authentic self, even though you have gone through trauma, even though you have experienced some really bad things in your life. You can still have the chance to create a meaningful and joyful life, because everybody deserves it.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And I think for some people, this idea of authentic self and who you are is something quite new to them, because we all just run a range of narratives about ourselves, and they start in early childhood. So, you know, you're either the shy child or the difficult child or the greedy child or the lazy child. And from there, you know, you collect all these labels and beliefs about yourself that may not even be close to being true.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And I when I talk to my clients about schema therapy, I like presenting schemas as glasses. So this is the glasses that you see the world through. So you believe that the world is a place where everybody is deprived, or the world is a place with unrelenting standards, or the world is a place where you need to mistrust and like to be cautious around other people. So we need to change our glasses sometimes, and be able to see the world from a different perspective, and or be able to be aware that this is my glasses that I see the world now. Okay, so this is the deprivation, the emotion deprivation, let's say, schema, or this is the unrelenting standard schema. So sometimes we learn the wrong message from our experiences, and we see the world from a very distorted reality. And I remember many years ago, one of my clients, when we were talking about relationships, and I asked her the question, okay, I know what you give in your relationship, but what do you take in your relationship? And she was looking at me very surprised, very shocked, as if she was hearing that for the first time. And she said, what do you mean? Are we supposed to take also in relationships? So this was a new information because she has not seen the world through these glasses ever and ever in her life. So this
No.
was completely new. Like, are we supposed to also take?
But that
Yeah,
probably wouldn't be that uncommon for a lot of women, and particularly women born in a certain segment of life. That feels really real for them.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I like the glasses actually. That's a really good way. And it's sort of like saying to people, you don't even know that you've been wearing the glasses.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
always,
Probably because I'm wearing glasses. That's why I use this
it's handy
example.
for you. I know.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not far away. I had a client say to me actually recently, it's amazing you don't wear glasses, Nadine, because I'm clearly looking like I'm probably close to that. But so far, so good.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah, 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 yeah,
wear
yeah.
them.
And I love how much you talk, about the imagery rescripting. And I've
Mm,
also experienced this technique not only as powerful when it happens, but also as challenging. I know how difficult it is, especially for people that they have been avoiding their feelings, people that they have been through traumatic experiences and they have locked this part of themselves somewhere, in the closet,
mm,
and they're not approaching it. How difficult it is for them to close their eyes, to imagine things, to get in contact with their feelings. So it can be powerful, but also scary, right?
mm. Absolutely. And I think it's just a real balancing act. So, I think for the most part, when you do imagery rescripting, it's a really good experience for clients, and they feel very met, and they feel better afterwards, and they have a clearer sense of the glasses, as you were talking before, that they might have been wearing and why they're wearing them. But there are a percentage of clients, and obviously the more traumatized you are, I think the more you're going to not want to even go back into there,
Yeah, exactly.
because you've spent most of your life trying. Some people I work with, they say to me, I've spent my whole life trying not to be that little girl, Nadine, that you want me now to go and visit in the image, and no thank you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
some of
yeah.
them bravely actually do it, but then it is too distressing for them. So we have to find a way to kind of titrate that back in, just little drip by drip, to find different ways of doing that. So sometimes I'll even start people on something happening in current life and send a little message to the vulnerable child in that moment, rather than actually get them to be in that little self version of themselves when they're back, 3, 4 years old or 5 years old. So I think as schema therapists and anyone using imagery or scripting, we're always having to think about, is the client just avoiding this because it is hard, or is it too much for them at the moment and I have to come at this in a different, slower way?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think one of the things that my supervisor, I've got a beautiful supervisor, Liz Lacey, but she was talking with me about how if it feels good and the client feels supported and seen and heard through that imagery scripting, and they get a good outcome, then we keep going with it. But if it doesn't go well, then we need to think very much about, is this the tool that's going to help this person? Because the beauty of schema therapy is there's different ways to come at things. We don't have to use imagery scripting. Sometimes, particularly in that schema therapy group that I run, I see therapists thinking like imagery scripting is schema therapy. And it's like, no, it's just one of those things. And it's like, if you're a good parent, so in schema therapy, we're in the role of the good parent. And so if something is really distressing and disturbing for our child and there's a better, easier way to do that, then we would do that. And it's the same with imagery rescripting. So
exactly. And it's creating safety first before we
Hmm.
try any technique. Creating safety that I know it's difficult and I know that you don't want to go there. So, as you said, we take it bit by bit, we make it safe first. That's why we also have the safe place imagery.
Yeah.
And then maybe the timing is not right. Maybe we don't need to try imagery rescripting in the
Hmm.
first sessions. Maybe first we need to work on a more intellectual level, work on the other techniques,
Yeah.
and then when more trust is built, then work on with the feelings and the imagery scripting.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why what we call imagery or assessment can be quite handy. So we don't actually go into any trauma, but we will just ask the client to do something like the lonely child on the street, where they see another little child, and then they see themselves. And then we can also do just seeing themselves in their childhood home. And for people like the client that I had said, I don't, I've spent my whole life trying not to be that, those two didn't go so great. So really, that was a sign that we need to do that later, not go straight into those things. And some of those things you sort of learn over time, and it's developing your own comfort with that, because there are some trainers out there that will say, well, you're colluding with avoidance if you don't just get in there with doing imagery. But it's really about making a clinical judgment and being in that good parent role and thinking about maximizing the opportunity for something like imagery rescripting to work in the future, rather than getting a blanket no because you've done one or two and it's just been terrible experience for them.
Exactly. Can we also use rescripting for self-soothing, not only for going back in the past and reconnecting with past traumas, but can we use it for self-soothing, for calming down in the present moment?
I think in that instance, it's probably not a rescript. It's just using imagery in itself to allow people to access certain sensations and feelings. So that's the beauty of imagery, is that we can just create certain feelings. It's the way that imagery rescripting works. It's like accessing something even though it's not happening now, and we can get the same activation of the schemas and the body sensations and everything. So yeah, absolutely, imagery. And actually, I talked to you a little before the interview about somatic experiencing, but one of the things that they use imagery for is actually healing imagery. So just developing really positive imagery of strength and courage and things like that. It's a spontaneous sort of technique based on sensation, but absolutely, imagery is an amazing tool. So it's something we would use a lot, as you know, because I know that you work with trauma, setting up quick ways to self-soothe and regulate our emotions using things like the calm place imagery too.
Is it something that we can do right now? Like, do you have, as you say, a spontaneous small exercise that we can do right now to calm down or to soothe ourselves?
Well, we could do the calm place exercise if you're happy for me to guide you through that.
Of course, yeah. I'm always open.
So, I'll just do it as if you're in a session with me, and so it's not the only way to do it, but it's just one of the ways to do it. And so for anyone listening, this would be something that I would teach pretty much everyone that comes to see me and is going to do something like either imagery scripting or EMDR, where we know we're going to get some big, strong feelings. And I want to have confidence, and I want the client to have confidence that they can come back to feeling settled before they leave my room. They're not going to be suspended in a state of high distress for that if that happens. So it's just a very routine thing, and many of you listening who've been to therapists have probably done it as well. So you're happy to go ahead?
Very happy, yes.
Okay. All right. So if we just begin by either closing your eyes or finding a spot to focus on the room, whichever is more comfortable for you. And now just noticing the weight of your feet on the floor, the feeling of your body in the chair. And now bringing your attention to the head and its heaviness on your shoulders. And gently bringing your awareness to your breathing, just noticing the breath flowing in and out of the body. And in a moment, I'd like you to bring to your mind an image of a place that feels calm, soothing, and relaxing. Now, this can be an image or memory of a time that you have actually lived. It can be when you're alone or with others. It can be a place that you like to visit and that you know makes you feel content, calm, and relaxed. Or it can be somewhere that you'd like to go because it's always felt like it would be very relaxing. Perhaps you have a picture of it at your home, or you've just seen it and thought, if I went there, I would feel really good. And when you've got something, Vasia, just give me a nod with your head if you've got something that can bring those sorts of feelings to you. Good. Okay. And so just keeping your eyes closed, just tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in that image.
I'm in a forest and
Mm-hmm.
everything is green around me. I
Mm-hmm.
can hear the sound of the leaves,
Mm.
the birds chirping. I can
Mm-hmm.
hear my footsteps on the ground.
Mm.
And all this is so calming. Uh,
Okay. Good.
the
Okay. So that
sunlight.
sounds like a really beautiful image to use for this. So
Yeah.
we'll just stay there with that one. And you by yourself there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so I just want you to really see yourself there with the greenery around you and just bring to your awareness the sounds of the birds and the forest, and also noticing what you can smell. Is there any smells that you can find in this image?
The soil, the smell of the soil.
Yeah, so the smell of the forest soil.
Yeah.
And what about the air around you? How does that feel?
It feels fresh and very light breeze is touching
Yeah.
my body as well.
Yeah, just notice those sensations.
Mm.
And there might be a taste memory. Sometimes people, when they're out walking in the forest, they've been eating or drinking, but if not, that's okay. So just notice if there's any taste memory there.
No, not so much.
No, so much. It's really more things that you can hear and see, the feeling of the air around your body, the sound of your footsteps, that sort of thing. So I want you to really sink yourself deeper and deeper into everything you can see, everything you can hear, everything you can smell and touch and feel around your body, and just really tapping into that feeling of relaxation, just how good it feels to be in the forest, just you in the forest. Have you got a sense of that? Yeah. And
Yeah.
where would you put
Yeah.
that feeling of calm and relaxation on a scale of 0 to 10? If 0 is neutral and 10 is the most upset that you could be, 0 is
I think it's a
calm.
10.
Oh,
I think it's a 10.
so 10 being the most relaxed that you could
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah. So I just want you to notice how quickly you can get to a deep feeling of relaxation just by using this image. Yeah. Okay. And if you're happy to keep going, I can do what I would normally do, but are you ready to come back to me?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, okay. So if it was less than a hey feeling,
Yeah. It's so nice. It's like
you've got
a,
the
a very refreshing break.
oh, that's good. You've got
Yeah.
that look I have at the end of yoga where I'm a bit kind of,
Exactly.
yeah. So if I was doing that in a session and it wasn't a 10 of relaxation, it was less, I would keep going and sinking deeper and deeper and getting people to really notice all of those sensory aspects of the memory. And then usually what I would do is then test it against something stressful as well. So we would wipe that one. We would find something from today that's been annoying, or sort of like 5 out of 10 annoying, and then use the calm place and see if that can recreate the positive feeling of relaxation. So
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and it's always helpful, to have a safe place imagery where you can feel a little bit more relaxed, even though it's not a 10 sometimes. But if your day, the actual day is a 2, just getting to 5 or 6 is already good enough.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting actually, because I'm always working the opposite way, where I'm thinking of distress as the 10 and the rather than in the positive, I have to say. But so I would say to people, when you're 7 out of 10 distress, then 4 feels pretty good. So if we can get down to 4 with this, and it's just one of the tools. But yeah, thank you for letting me guide you through that and trusting me to do that.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. And your voice was so calming as well.
Mm.
I also like when you, the way that you describe in your blog, because I read many articles that you have there,
Oh,
that you integrate body and bottom-up strategies in your therapy. So can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, so traditional therapy tends to work from the idea that thoughts create feelings, and also if we have a feeling, we can use our thoughts to regulate those and change them and shift them so we feel less of something. And as our understanding of trauma has progressed, particularly in the last 20 years, we've recognized that actually a lot of stuff happens in the body and communicates up to the mind, and that sensation is happening quicker than thought. And so what we can do a lot is actually use the resources of the body, use the messages that the body is sending us, and use that calming potential of the body. And when I did my initial training, some of it was already coming through. We were taught to how to get people to breathe so that they could activate their vagal nerve and feel more relaxed and that sort of thing. But it's just so much more. There's so much more potential for using the body to do that. And so even for myself, I see, like, if I'm unsettled at night, so I can be a little bit hypervigilant and struggle to go to sleep, I lie up against the wall with my feet up the wall in a yoga move, and that is one of the best ways just to settle my body and my heart rate, and then I can think more clearly. Whereas in the past, I would have been like trying to challenge my thinking and be supportive and all that sort of stuff, and I just couldn't get through the distress of the body. And so these things, they're pretty good because you don't have to do much and you've got your body with you all the time. You don't have to outthink yourself, because I think sometimes, particularly when you're a therapist and you know CBT, and then trying to CBT yourself, and you can go around in all sorts of circles with that. So yeah, that is why I look at working with the body, and it's just providing people with a place to calm and soothe their body first, and then we can think more clearly. Dan Siegel talks about that flipping of the lid, and I think when that's happened, trying to support yourself with thinking is very, very hard. Whereas if you can have these learnt body-based techniques that you can do to try and settle the body first, then this can come back on and you can feel more able to communicate with your emotional self about what to do next.
Yeah. And especially for people that they have gone through trauma, their relationship with their body has been disrupted to a degree. So in therapy, we're trying to recreate the relationship with the body, to bring ourselves back to our senses, to connect again with our body and feel our body again as a safe vessel, as something
Yeah.
that we can reconnect and feel safety again.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just in terms of those body-based techniques, just a very simple one is the one where it's like a self-hug, and you put your arm under the left side where your heart is. I'm terrible with my left and right, everybody. I always have to think, which side is this? And then you place your other hand there and you just breathe in that position. And for most people, that feels very centering, and it is that little body container for them.
Yeah.
For some people, I'm a little bit like this. It can feel a bit too tight, so you need to work on other things. So they might prefer more this, and that actually feels quite soothing, like a loving parent or carer who's touching your forehead when you're not well. Or you can do it. Can't really see it here, but here.
Yes.
And that's quite a good way. When you do it that way, you can then focus on your breath and bring yourself back into your body. But one of the things that I find really exciting is there's a lot of focus in therapy of sort of trying to get people to calm down, and it's sort of a form of stillness. And for many of my clients, they can't meditate and it's too still for them. And so I try and teach them things when they're dysregulated that will actually release that energy. So one of the ones that people like is, I can't remember the proper label in somatic experience, but I call it bird wing taps, where you just go up and down like this.
Yes.
And then there's another one where you do these tight grabs up and down. And you can just keep going with these things over and over and over. But it does really help with those people who they can't do a mindfulness of breath still sitting there exercise, because their body is just raging with energy. So I mean, there's lots and lots of different things that you
Yes.
can look at, but for everyone watching, those are just some very simple ones. And I would encourage you, when you do this. So this is me, sometimes the legs up the wall in the yoga, and I do this and I breathe.
Can you explain this for people that are listening, not watching?
Oh, okay. So I've got one hand on my forehead and I've got one hand on my diaphragm muscle. And I then focus on my breath. And then coming back to the schema therapy, I would use a healthy adult message to my vulnerable child mode. So I would try and be supportive and caring. And I find that from that, once I've regulated my body, I can accept those messages. But if the body isn't calm, it's just like it's kind of bounces off the window like a raindrop that's too hard. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think, harnessing that energy, and for those people who, because it's all very mainstream now, meditation, mindfulness, and I think sometimes people are not recognizing that for some clients that's actually stillness makes them feel trapped or threatened, or they fear they can't do it wrong because they were that kid at school who couldn't sit still. They've got the little jiggly legs, and it brings back a whole heap of stuff, which is the opposite of what we're trying to help them with. So it's really about choosing the type of technique to regulate that works for you. Like one of the most simple ones, and I'm going to, no, if you can't see me, is when you scrunch up your entire body and then you release that in one go. So when I was training, we used to do all the progressive muscle up down, but I just find that is so much better to scrunch the whole thing at once and get all that tension there and then let it go. And also kind of what we're teaching ourselves is it doesn't take much to let it go. And sometimes if we make it more, we can then make it less. With many of our clients, they're afraid of making the sensation more. They don't want to do that. Like, what if it gets worse? And then we can release. And those are very, very easy things to do.
Wow, very useful what you're sharing here. And it's amazing because it takes us as therapists out of this mindset that one approach can heal everything, which is not the case. We need the CBT, we need the schema, we need the body, the somatic experiencing techniques. We need a more holistic approach. It's not like we choose one and then we go with it. We need to be flexible because everybody has their own needs. And especially now that we're talking about inclusion and we're talking about neurodivergent clients, we need to take into consideration that more people have different needs than we have been trained in supporting them. So not everybody is feeling, as you said, comfortable with mindfulness. It's good for some, but not good for others.
No. And I think even for myself, I'm not someone who it works particularly well with. And so that's why I do it with yoga, because when I'm grounded in my body, then I can observe myself. But if I just try and sit there, my mind's very busy and I'm thinking of all my clients and I'm thinking of this, and I'm just honestly not even being mindful. I'm just thinking. So if there's something about when I can still the body, then I can do that next bit. But yeah, I think it's just sort of, and then, if you're a therapist listening to this as you move through your career, you will find these things because you will have to, because you will meet clients who the stuff that you were trained in doesn't work. And I think when you're deeply caring and interested in people, you find these things. So
yes, absolutely. Coming towards the end of this very interesting, I could talk to you for hours. I mean, you have so much knowledge, and your way of explaining it's so clear and so interesting. So another thing that I also read at your blog articles was the pizza party example, and I loved it.
So the pizza party is not my idea. I should make that clear. It's Ida Shaw's original metaphor. And Ida is an amazing schema therapist and trainer. So she's very well known, and there's a very good interview, free one of hers on YouTube if you want to Google her, everybody, and you'll see what I mean about what a gem she is. So The pizza party is just a little story that helps explain how we all have parts of ourselves, and we can move through those when we're having difficulties or when we're having a day that's hard. And so the pizza party story is about a mother of some children who's really looking forward to the end of her day because she's going to get a night off from childcare and dinner preparation and all of that sort of thing. And she goes off to work, and unfortunately, the first thing that happens is she gets told off by her boss, and she's like, okay, and I don't like it when I get told off, but it's okay because tonight I'm going to relax. It's all good. And then she has another interaction with a colleague that leaves her feeling criticized. And then she's like, oh my goodness, could this day get any worse? Like, gosh, well, that's okay because I don't even have to cook dinner. It's just going to be me in the bath tonight. It's wonderful. And then she has to run an errand, and she steps in a puddle and her whole foot. I don't know if any of you have been through that, but that's one of my most hated things is you get wet feet and you have to go back to work. And I have to say it doesn't happen that much in Australia, but because we don't have that much rain, but when it does, it's not nice. And then she's like, don't worry about it. You've got tonight. Really looking forward to that bath now, and I'm going to feel better. And then 10 minutes before she has to leave work, she gets a call from her husband, and she says, I'm not going to be able to pick up the kids, and I'm not going to be able to take them to pizza. So the whole plan of how I'm going to feel better just evaporates. Everybody who's a parent, when I tell this story, they know from the beginning what's going to happen. I think we may have all lived this version of this story of the big letdown, but, and obviously we all love our children, but it is nice to have a little rest from them as well. So she's very upset by this point because there's no escape. There's no self-care moment. She's going to have to go and get these children, and she gets them in the car. And anyway, when she gets home, she says, okay, kids, the kids are upset. No pizza, no going to the restaurant. She says, I'm going to order the pizza, give me 10 minutes, and then we're going to have this pizza party at home. And the kids are thinking that's good because they're getting pizza, and that's what they wanted in the first place instead of their vegetables and whatever they would normally eat at home. And so she goes into her bedroom, and she has a little talk to the parts of herself. And so the vulnerable part of her says, oh, no, it's not I don't like it when people talk to me like that. They were so mean, and I felt all by myself. There was no one there for me at work today. And then her angry child part says, it's so unfair. They always pick on me, and I don't like it. That was really mean, and I go crazy at my boss for the way he talks to me. And then her critic part says, well, what do you expect? You made the mistake. You've got to take the punishment and just get over yourself. And, how dare you even think that you should have a night off from taking care of your kids? And then her healthy adult part says, hey, of course you feel that way. Nobody likes being told off at work, and you try and do a good job, and it's not nice to not be seen and appreciated for that and only notice when someone doesn't like something. Of course that hurt. And it's understandable that you find that angry, unfair. I'm sure most people would. And then it says, enough of you, critic mode. You've always got something negative to say. And she's doing her best. And then it says, and look, you've saved the day. The kids are happy. And you're a good mother. You've still given them something, so well done for you. And it's just a little story that helps us see how we would take care of ourselves in a situation. But most importantly, that it's okay to have complaints, because many people feel bad, and their critic really goes quite strongly at them if they dare to complain. I don't know how many people say, oh, well, I can't really complain about my life because, I'm not a slave in another country or something very extreme. And so complaints seem to get shut down. But if we don't take care of our feelings and we don't back ourselves, then we can get very distressed. So our healthy adult mode is just acting like the good parent in that situation, soothing, understanding, picking up the pieces, stopping the criticism and punishment from the critic part, and allowing that lady to get on with her day. If you're
Oh,
listening, yeah,
yeah.
it's lovely. If you're listening
Yeah.
to this, nearly every one of my clients say, "But the kids wouldn't give you 10 minutes." And I say, "Yeah, I know, but it's a little story."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So you
yeah, yeah.
probably have to do that mode walkthrough very quickly if you have young
Indeed,
children
indeed,
anyway.
indeed, indeed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, it's a true story indeed. But at least you're not saying take an hour or an hour break from your kids. 10 minutes, I think it's doable, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Doable.
it's just sort of even if you try, even if you
Yeah,
allow yourself, like a lot
yeah,
of people might not allow themselves to have that little break.
yeah.
But even a small couple of minutes just to settle yourself can really help some people.
Correct,
But yeah, and
correct.
it's sort of an example of how, we don't need really luxurious self-care. Like often as women, we're marketed to go to the spa and get a 3-hour massage. But really this more in the moment taking care of yourself is probably way more effective than those sorts of things.
Indeed, indeed.
Mm.
But you also bring the element of training our people, our favorite people, our important people, understanding and knowing our needs. So probably the
Mm.
first time that your kids will hear something like Mama needs 10 minutes, they will be like, yeah, no, whatever. No, it's not going to happen. But if you say that again and again and you explain them, eventually they're learning because they have heard that you make
Yeah,
space for that. You don't squeeze yourself, but you make space and
that's right.
people respect that.
That's right. And also, I think it's sometimes with very, very little children, they don't have that capacity to wait. But as your children get older, they can and they will not die if they have to wait or be
Yeah.
terribly emotionally damaged if their mum took 10 minutes in their bedroom to calm down. And that is probably much better than I know when I have not taken care of myself in a situation like this, I might be very irritable with my children for the
Yeah.
rest of the time. And that's, not great outcome either. But yeah,
Yeah.
the pizza story, it's a good one. And you can do it with any situation in your life where if you're feeling quite heightened, you've probably got some of those parts of yourself being activated. So absolutely there's a vulnerable part being activated and the critic is probably in there telling you off. And
Yeah.
you really need to, with schema therapy, probably should have said this at the beginning when we were talking about it, but we were always trying to build that healthy adult mode. So that's our internal good parent to take care of ourselves.
Exactly, exactly. Taking control, the healthy adult taking control. Of course, there's going to be, we will never get rid of our inner critic. We will never get rid of our modes, but the main mode, the main part of us will be the healthy adult, having the
Hmm.
overview, having the control, being able to say, well, I need less of you now, inner critic. I don't need this mode. I have my own skills and strengths.
Hmm. Hmm.
So just giving the healthy adult the main role, the protagonist role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
How people can find you and benefit from your wisdom.
Okay. So my website is nadinevanderlinden.com, and that's the website that I have my training for therapists and my online course, Thriving Therapist Formula. That's going to be available soon, and you can sign up for my mailing list there as well.
You have an online course coming.
Yeah, so I've got the
Oh,
webinars on the trauma skill. So I've been teaching you some of the things that I would teach people in the webinars today. So those are on there, but I ran a really successful course last year. It was originally called How to Be Authentic, Confident and Thriving Therapist, but I've just now called it Thriving Therapist Formula, and it's got some extra added bits, but that's in the wings and I'm going to launch it in the next couple of months. So I'm very excited about that. And, there's lots of blogs there. You can get to know me. There's videos and obviously I have a Facebook page just with my name as well. But it's just really been beautiful to be with you today. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and be part of
absolutely.
the anti-loneliness podcast. It's great.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It was an honor talking to you, and I've learned so many things from you. And this is what I also like about meeting other professionals or being in
Mm.
trainings, because I get to, get a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, a lot
Mm.
of different perspectives from other psychologists, and I love it. So,
Yeah,
yes,
that's wonderful.
thank you so much. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it, and I'm sure that our listeners or our the people that watch this are going to
Mhm.
enjoy this interview. So,
Thank you.
thank you very
And
much.
And we should probably mention, if you want to learn more about schema therapy and you're someone who isn't a therapist, but there is Reinventing Your Life, the self-help book version of schema therapy. So, and Breaking Negative Thinking Patterns is another one, which is about the parts of self that you heard about in the pizza party story. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Yes, absolutely. They're really good books. And in the description of this interview, I will mention all the ways that people can contact Nadene, but also these books that you mentioned, and people can choose their way so that they can support themselves in the best possible
Yeah,
way.
that's awesome. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.